Okay. So, let's see if I'm streaming. I think I am. Just oh yes, I am. I'm streaming, guys. Perfect. So, hey there. Today is going to be a stream about the movie Back to the Future. It's a very cool, futuristic science fiction, action, thrill-packed movie, and I'm gonna scroll through the timeline and show you how to find the different acts of this movie. Once upon a time, I stumbled upon a movie on YouTube which was sped up around 3 to 4 times. So an entire movie from 2 hours was compressed into 40-ish minutes. And I watched the movie in 40 minutes, and suddenly I started seeing the structure of that movie. I started to see the individual scenes, the individual acts, the individual sequences much easier. And if you're a writer or a filmmaker and you are struggling with how to create a story, especially for a movie, then perhaps this is a way to start. I'm gonna start playing this film for you guys, and little by little we will just scroll through the timeline, and I'll show you what I've seen so far for myself. I think it's a great way to learn from doing instead of diving into books and then discovering uh, that the more you learn, the less confident you become, which is the Dunning-Kruger effect, if I pronounce it correctly. So the more you learn about a certain topic, the more uncertain you become that there's much more, like exponentially more, every time you learn a bit more. So in order to throw these thoughts, these bad thoughts out of the window, practice makes perfect. So we're just going to do a pragmatic approach. We're just putting the timeline here in this DaVinci Resolve program. We're going to scrub through at a very high speed so that you do not get sucked in emotionally into this movie. All right, guys, let's just start somewhere. So we have the opening title here of the movie, and we're not gonna watch the entire movie at the normal speed. We're just gonna fly through it at 2 times or sometimes even 3 or 4 times the speed, so that you do not get sucked in emotionally into the movie and you see the movie objectively. All right, so we got this introduction scene here, and if you watch with me here in the timeline where my mouse is, you can see that I pre-cut it. Sorry, let me just. I pre-cut every individual scene here, and then I color coded the scenes into their own. So what we see is the first scene is about the opening credits. We have close-up shots of Marty himself, and then eventually here after the blast we reveal his face for the first time after 4 minutes into the movie. Now we reveal his face. He gets this call that something is going to happen at midnight. Then he discovers he's late for school. And then we have a cut because we shot in one arena, which is inside an interior, and now we go to outside the exterior. It's a montage of him traveling to school and meeting his girlfriend.
He was a slacker too. Can I go now, Mr. Stricker? I noticed your band is on the roster for the dance auditions after school today. Why even bother, McFly? You don't have a chance. You're too much like your old man. No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley. Well, history is going to change.
Alright, so Marty didn't make it the auditions, of course, you know, he wants to be a rock star. But he needs a car to get, you know, to drive the girl to the lake. So we see it in this second sequence is Marty is introduced to his everyday life. So he's a school guy. He goes to school. School sucks. Can't approach his dreams. Then his girlfriend wants him to take her out to the lake, but he doesn't have the car yet. Although he does promises he's gonna take her to the car lake, and then we have this little introduction about the clock tower, because the clock tower is gonna come later at the end of the movie back as a savior. And then we have a cut here when this sequence ends. There we go. And now here we start the third sequence, or I would say scene. So in this scene, Marty is approaching and interacting with his family, and the family has problems of their own, which is Biff. All right, so what we see in these first three scenes is Marty. He is a very dynamic guy. He has talent to be a rock star. He has this hot girlfriend, but the world around him is just full of nobodies. And that is going to be Marty's biggest obstacles in order to become, in order to spread his wings, right? Every person needs to spread his wings in life. So this is the introduction of this of these three scenes here. And we go into the fourth scene where Marty is, getting this call.
I'm away.
So the call is in story writing is referred to the call of adventure, and the call of adventure usually goes hand in hand with the mentor figure. If you're a writer, there are like 14 types of characters, and this is the mentor figure that introduces Marty to the call to adventure, right? Or James Cameron would call it the catalyst. The doc, Emmett Brown, is in this case the catalyst that speeds up Marty's life in order for him to just go into, well, we would say trouble, because through trouble people change and grow. So let's scroll. Marty goes to the mall and the parking lot. Alright, Dr. Emmett Brown shows him in this scene how the time machine works.
Einstein has just become the world's first.
Alright.
Still ticking. He's all right. He's fine. He's completely unaware that anything happened. As far as he's concerned, the trip was instantaneous. That's why his watch is exactly 1 minute behind mine. He skipped over that minute to instantly arrive at this moment in time. Come here. I'll show you how it works.
All right, and here we have a cut, and now we go to the second part of this long sequence, because the first part is the introduction of the time machine, and the second part is the introduction of how the time machine works, and something else, of course, will happen here. So we see here that it works on plutonium, which is a very important scene. That's why it takes like 2 or 3 minutes. And now we are in the fourth. So this first part, the second part, and now the third part of this very long sequence, where the Libyans have found Dr. Emmett Brown, and they're trying to kill him because he stole the plutonium. Marty jumps in the time machine to save himself, but the more he steps on the gas,
See if your bastard can do 90.
alright, the more he steps on the gas, he activates the time travel machine, and then suddenly he's gone. He's gone from the real world, and he went just straight into a new into the new world, which is the past in this case. Let's move on. So he goes into the past. He crashes the car in this barn, and people start shooting at him. All right, and there's a cut there because we go to a new space again. This is a very small sequence. It's actually an in-between sequence between the first act and the second act. And I'll show the acts a little more in a little bit, how the acts work in this movie. All right, so he's in this new world, we would say. There we go. So he's literally walking into the new world. And from here on, we start this new sequences where he is in the new world, and the first few are going to be set in this in the town, in the town where he just walks by, trying to figure out where he is. He finds out, oh my God, I'm in 1955. So yeah, that would be the first inciting incident where something has happened to him, and he got this insight about, oh my God, I am in a new world. Some would argue that the time machine, seeing the time machine, is the first inciting incident. I would say that this is the catalyst of the movie. But without going into further details, let's stick to the structure of the movie. Alright, so after the town, there's a cut because he goes into this shop where he meets his dad, the younger version of his dad, and he meets Biff with his adversary, with his gang, the adversary with a gang. Then he goes out. We have a cut, of course.
Oh, hey, Biff, hey.
He goes out. He tries to walk to his own street, to his own house, and he sees his father on the street. This is the first, problem of the movie, that he saves his father, but his father needed to be hit by the car. Anyway, moving forward, he wakes up in this bed, and his younger version of his mother is trying to seduce him with a lot of help. And we scroll forward. Marty is introduced to the family, to his grandparent, the younger version of his grandparents, and well, he's trying to be polite, but then Lorraine, his mom, isn't playing that polite, so he's trying to walk away, and there we have a cut again, right? So it's I'm just cutting all the scenes or the sequences in their individual individual times that they play out through, and as you just look at the movie 3 times the speed, you can very easily see these beginning and end points of scenes. So here's a scene where Marty is trying to look up the younger version of Emmett Brown in order to ask for help. How the hell can he go back to the future? But the younger version of Emmett Brown doesn't believe him just yet. So.
And that's when he came up with the idea for the flux capacitor, which.
All right, so we have a cut there. New scene. Marty McFly shows the time machine, and then they grab the video camera from inside the car. Then they are back at the barn, and Doc is shocked that in 30 years he has finally developed the time machine that he was already working on.
Next Saturday night, we're sending you back to the future. Okay, all right, Saturday's good. Saturday's good. I spent a week in 1955. Hang out, you can show me around. Marty, listen, give me another question. You must not leave this house. You must not see anybody or talk to anybody. Anything you do could have serious repercussions on future events. Do you understand?
So here, finally, at the midpoint of the movie, they running up to the midpoint of the movie, they discovered a way to send Marty back in time.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Marty, you interact with anybody else today besides me? I might have sort of bumped into my parents. Frank Scott. Can we see that photograph of your brother?
But there's a complication.
Just as I thought. This was my theory. Look at your brother. See, it's good. It's like he's been erased. Erased from existence.
Usually here would be the commercial break, and it's very well timed also, because it's right at the center of the movie, which is the almost 1 hour mark, and this movie is almost 2 hours long.
Whoa. Clean this place up. What's brand new?
So now we go into the second half of this movie. And the second half is actually, so now we're just running up to the midpoint, the biggest pressure, because Marty has tumbled down like Alice into the rabbit hole. And now from this point on, he has finally got a plan how to come out of this rabbit hole, but he needs to start executing the plan. And the first part of the plan is to get his father to fall in love with Lorraine, right? His mother. All right, so the first part, Marty is trying the very easy, basic approach to fixing his problem is just by introducing Lorraine to George McFly.
It's really a pleasure to meet you.
How's your hair?
Good. Fine.
Oh, I've been so worried about you ever since you ran off the other night. Are you okay? I'm sorry, I have to go. Isn't it dream?
That didn't work. So this plan didn't work.
You didn't even look at him. This is more serious than I thought.
So I believe the first plan is here where, let me scroll back a little. First plan, Marty, where's Marty? All right, so Marty goes into the new world. The first plan is to go to Dr. Emmett Brown for a solution. Dr. Emmett Brown doesn't have a solution, but a solution is proposed by accident that perhaps they have to step up a notch a little and try to get Lorraine and George to fall in love with each other. So the second plan will be Marty trying to get George to ask Lorraine to the
I guess it
prom.
would be pretty hard for somebody to understand. No, not at all. So anyway, George, not Lorraine.
George, how about Lorraine? All right, so he's trying really hard in a second plan to get George to ask Lorraine out. And it doesn't work, he's getting left behind. So another great thing about films is a ticking a timer or something that ticks away. And here we have this picture where the people are starting to fade away one by one. First it was the head faded away, now it's the body.
Oh, yeah, all right, okay.
So they're trying a second time.
I know you from somewhere.
Yes.
They're trying a second time, but of course this doesn't work
I know
out.
you from somewhere.
Yes, I'm George McFly. I'm your density.
I'm your density. So Biff walks in this to stir up things, make things not so possible, not so easily possible. All right, so this is another endpoint of this scene.
I'm gonna get that son of a bitch.
I don't know, but I'm gonna find out.
And things just started getting more complicated. Marty needs a new plan. So he goes back to Dr. Emmett Brown. Dr. Emmett Brown has a plan how to do the technical part of getting Marty back to the future. But Marty is running behind because he still haven't found the solution to the first part of the problem, which is getting George and Lorraine, kissing each other and falling in love. So these two problems need to be solved in order to go back to the future. So instead of George asking Lorraine out, Lorraine is coming to Marty to ask Marty out.
What about George?
George McFly? Oh, he's kind of cute and all, but not. Well, I think a man should be strong, so he can stand up for himself and protect the woman he loves. Don't you?
I still don't understand. How am I supposed to go to the dance with her if she's already going to the dance with you?
All right, so the first two problems have failed. Marty went to Dr. Emmett Brown to ask him, the younger version, how to go back to the future. That didn't turn out because he doesn't know. He doesn't know how to evoke 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. The second plan was for Marty to go to George and get George to talk to Lorraine, to meet each other. Maybe a spark will occur, but he even made it worse. The third plan of Marty is to actually make a scene where George is going to hit Marty in the car at the prom, and then show that he is masculine, that he's a man, that he's strong. In the previous scene here.
Oh, he's kind of cute and all, but not. Well, I think a man should be strong.
I think a man should be strong, and this is a segue to the next part where he's trying to make George McFly strong.
She just doesn't know it yet. To a rescue, right? Okay, let's go over the plan again. 8:55. Where are you gonna be?
I'm gonna be at the dance.
Right, and where am I gonna be?
You're gonna be in the car with her.
Right. Okay, so right around 9 o'clock, she's gonna get very angry with me.
Why is she gonna get angry with you?
Well, because George, nice girls get angry when guys take advantage of them.
Oh, you mean you're gonna go touch her on her?
No, sure.
All right, so they're trying to make this plan work. They're preparing for the plan. Hey, get your damn hands off her. All right, so that was the preparation of the third plan to get everything.
Are you sure about the storm?
So as we can see here, also the mood changed. Now that they had their plan, their third and final biggest plan set up, the next sequence of scenes has changed. As we can see now, it's dark. It was light, daytime, the second act of the movie, and now the third act of the movie, it's dark. This scene here is it's like a setup. It's like an in-between scene, just like we saw at the end of the first act, an in-between scene. But it's sometimes you can put in important information here in very tiny scenes. So Marty is trying to do multiple tasks at the same time. So not only save his own ass to get back to the future, but also save Doc's, Dr. Emmett Brown's ass by sliding the brief in his pocket, warning him what is going to happen after 30 years, that the Libanons are going to, shoot him after he stole the plutonium from them. So you need little scenes like these to set up a later event, something that is going to pay off later. You need to set them up early on. All right, so here is actually the very start of the third act of the movie, where the biggest plan is going to go into the execution. We have the introduction. Where are we? We are at the prom, at the dance. It's already happening. George is there now. All right, so we have this scene here where there's an awkward scene where Marty needs to do his part, and of course, it's not going to be as easy as he thinks. That's why we haven't resolved this as fast yet. So we're just dragging it because it's not easy. That's how you create tension and drama and tension. All right, so it's almost 9 o'clock.
I'm gonna take it out of your ass.
Oh, go, Biff, you're drunk.
Well, look at what we have here.
This is how adversaries' characters pay off. Where if you forgot about Biff, the story would be boring. Problems would get resolved very easily, very fast. But usually you need a layer of problems. Like, for instance, the car that doesn't run except for plutonium, except for a lightning source. So that's one problem there. Second problem is your dad didn't, or your mom didn't fall in love with your dad. So there's a problem there. A third problem is Dr. Emmett Brown gets shot in the beginning of the movie because he stole plutonium. So you have these three big problems, scattered throughout the entire movie, giving pressure to the story to not evolve as easily as we wanted to. And then you have a fourth one, which is a Biff here, popping up every now and then. This is the third time he's going to pop up to make it even more complicated.
Take them back, all right? I'll be right there. Hey, be it spook. This don't concern you.
All right, just keep watching these cuts here in the story timeline. There we go. All right, so we're almost entering the end of this sequence here. All right, so Marty has two problems. One, the car needs to be charged for him to go back to the future. The second problem is George and Elaine need to kiss and fall in love. Let's say fall in love. But this problem of George and Elaine is consistent of two separate, problems of their own. So the first part of this problem of George and Elaine is George needs to step up as a strong man. So he needs to punch the bad guy in the face. That just happened right now. The second part of this problem is they need to kiss. So now in this second scene here, Marty is worried that they need to kiss before the end of the prom. But this black guy, his hand is hurt. Anyway, so that's why Marty became player of the bass, or is it guitar? It's a guitar. 6 strings. All right, so there's another character arc here where George isn't prepared to kiss Lorraine just yet. And we see the consequences. Marty is slowly fading away because the ticking bomb time clock is almost to its end. Just watch the music. Watch the music. It's just building up because this is the final frontier. There we go. All right, so and this cut here, finally the third plan has been done. It's he got George and Elaine together to kiss each other. But now we're not done with the movie, and Marty needs a new plan. And his new plan, after this cool scene here where he shows off. He says goodbye to George and Lorraine.
Name.
Nice name. All right, so next plan is Marty needs to go back in time, physically back in time. So he goes back to Dr. Emmett Brown, who is already done with setting up the lightning equipment. Everything will be fine. All right. So the fourth plan is for Marty to get in the car and drive the car 88 miles per hour through that street, getting the lightning to hit the car at the exact same moment as the car reaches that point of the road, hitting the wire that is set up across the road. That's the new plan. But suddenly, a new problem is going to arise. That's why we have, still 10 more minutes or so, 20 more minutes or so to the end of the movie. There we go. So this is a new problem. The cable falls. And now the fifth problem, and the final problem is for the doctor to get the cable fixed so that the lightning can pass through. And at the same time, Marty needs to get into the car and wait for the right moment to hit the gas pedal. And they did it. I just fast forward this a little bit, but eventually they did it. At the exact time, Dr. Emmett Brown got the cable to work, and the fifth problem has been resolved. And Marty got back into the future. All right. Now we have a cut there, of course, and we go into another chapter or another scene where Marty has arrived into the future, into the right time, 1985.
got a chance to tell me. And all that talk about screwing up future events, the space-time continuum. Well, I figured. What the hell?
So we see that after Marty comes back, there's nothing much he has to do because everything has been set up the right way in throughout the movie, so that when he goes back in time, Dr. Emmett Brown has already changed his own philosophies, his own self, and has put on a life jacket, a bulletproof vest underneath his underneath his clothes. So all good, all well. Marty goes back to his home, and we have this final chapter of any movie where all the loose ends have been tied in a good way, and we can leave the movie with a positive feeling that everything has changed. Everything has changed the right way, in a better way. So his family all is successful. Everybody has a great time. Everybody is happy. Opposed to if I scroll back here,
Well, I haven't finished those up yet, but you know, I figured.
His family are complete dorks. And now in the last part. And he got the car that he always wanted. He also got to be a rock star for a little moment.
Oh, you a sight for sore eyes. Let me look at you.
Marty, you're acting like you haven't seen me in a week.
I haven't.
You okay? Is everything all right?
Oh, yeah. Everything is great.
Anyway, just before that flash, there you can end the movie because all strings, everything has been resolved. Everybody got what they wanted, and you can just cue the music, start the end credits if you wanted to. But in this case, the producers, directors, whatever, filmmakers, they decided to put in a cliffhanger because it's going to be a sequel after this one. Marty, you have to come back to the future.
What happens to us in the future? Assholes or something? No, Marty. Go through the top side. It's your kids, buddy. Somebody's got to be like your kids. You got to back up. You don't have road to get up to 88. Roads. Where are we going to go? Roads.
Okay. So that was a scroll through the movie objectively without getting sucked into the movie emotionally. Okay, so pure objectively, so that you can see with me where the cuts are, and then agree on how story structure for movies like this action movie works. So let's go back to the beginning here. What have we seen so far? So in the first scene or chapter, we see the opening credits. We see close-up of Marty. Who is he? He's just a reckless guy. Doesn't think ahead of time. Wants to be a rock star as bad as possible. Then the second chapter here, we introduce him in the normal world where he is not wanted that much. So the jury doesn't like him. The principal doesn't like him. And his girlfriend is also pushing him to be a better guy, to change, to keep his word, because tonight is going to be an important night for them. So he promises her that he is going to show up. He is going to, be the man that people can rely on. So we have these three things set up here in this chapter. Third chapter here is inside of this arena with his parents. Then the second chapter after this is where he meets Dr. Emmett Brown. He meets the mentor. He meets the catalyst, if you may. And then there's another sequence here where there's a complication because plutonium is used. Then in this part is where the Libanons come, and Marty by accident falls into the rabbit hole. Not tumbles, but just literally trips into the rabbit hole, where he finds himself in a very strange new environment. Then we have a little other scene where he has to, where he, visually sees like the big picture, and he needs to hide the DeLorean car. Also, he witnessed here that the car doesn't have any power to start. Then this other sequence is where he tumbles and dusts himself, stands up, and sees where he's at, and he figures out he is in the year 1955. The inciting incident. Holy shit, Then he goes into this cafe, the local cafe. He wants to make a phone call, but by accident he meets his father and his father's enemies. Anyway, so quickly, quick recap. Let's start from the beginning. The first act, we see Marty in his own time, and the introduction of the time machine up until the problem of the consequence of the time machine, up until the point where he has traveled back in time. Okay, so this entire part here, all these scenes here, are the first act of the movie. They just belong together. And after this act, we jump into the second act of the movie, where everything starts to revolve, and problems and solutions needs to be found. So now he is in 1955. That's what we can call the second act. Then we have a scene where he meets his parents. Then he has to. The first problem is he needs to find Dr. Emmett Brown. Second plan, and the second problem is they need to find George and get him to talk to Lorraine. That doesn't work, and then complications are more that Lorraine starts liking Marty instead of George, and then the third plan is George and Marty needs to prepare George to be a physical guy. So this is the third plan of Marty. And that is the end of the second act. We have this in between scene here where some part are being set up, and then the plot continues after this scene where we start the third act. And the third act is this night scene. So we have the second act here, which consists of mostly daylight scenes, except for Dr. Brown here, the middle part, but mostly daylight scenes, as you can see, and then suddenly it just switches to nighttime scenes. So we have a lot of nighttime scenes here in the third act. Anyway, so scrolling through this movie in a very high speed, I just witnessed that there are multiple ways to cut this movie into acts. The classical way is to cut it into three major acts: the first act, the second act, and a third act. Also, everything in life comes in three. There's a setup or a build-up. Then there is this execution part where everything can go up, down, chaos, parts, whatever. Then there's a third part where everything needs to resolve. So wherever you go, starting from high, starting from low, doesn't matter. It needs to resolve into a positive outcome. So this movie, you can clearly see where the acts start. I just marked it here and there. hold on, this marker moved a little bit. But as we can see, the movie is 1 hour and 15 minutes, approximately two hours. And we're going to see that first act is approximately 30-35 minutes long. And the second act will also be approximately 35 minutes long. And the third act is going to be 35 minutes long. Yes, something like that. Another very important thing is that this 3-act structure is not the only structure you can divide a movie into. So this is a very broad, high point of view, if you can say it like so. So you have a very clear, distinct part, which is the beginning, which is Marty figures out a call to opportunity. 2, Marty needs to find his solution to fix the problem. And then the third part is the final push through and eventually fixing the problem. But there's also another way. Modern filmmaking has published these articles, these books. Writers are talking about the 4-act structure. Not the 3-act structure, but a 4-act structure. Meaning every act is, again, almost equally long, but there are 4 parts to them. So if I can show you that I also found the 4-act structure in this movie at the same time. So the first part is still the introduction of Marty in the ordinary world, and then this mentor gives him a call to adventure to go into an unordinary world. And then he goes into this unordinary world. We can still place a cut here and then go into the second act, which is much shorter this time and ends exactly at the midpoint of the movie. Okay, so in the 3-act structure, there is no end here because that will be a very short act. Since the first act is 30 minutes long or so, the second act cannot be shorter than that. But in this act structure, the 4-way structure, we call this Act 2A or 2, and then the second one we call 3 or 2B. So it's very clear here where everything is built up, pressure is being built up to the midpoint, where Marty has from here, where he's going back in time, he's tumbling down. Things are getting worse. You know, he goes to this cafe, things get worse. He goes to his parents' house, things get worse. And he goes to Emmett Brown, and things get even more worse. And then we have entered the midpoint of the story where things are at their worst. Then there is a 3rd act, and in the 3rd act, things need to go up again. So we have this plan, we have a solution how things can go up again. They start, building building the solution by having George man up to Lorraine. But of course, the 3rd act will go a little bit up, then it falls back down again, needs to go up again. It still needs to go up, but we see that it keeps falling down. Then eventually, after the midpoint of this act, suddenly things start to go up again, right? So it's a big zigzag here, making the story more interesting, not to give people a quick solution. All right, so finally here at the end of this act, Marty has succeeded with the first problem of the 2, which is to get George and Lorraine to kiss each other. And so we cut this, we end the act here, and we start into a new act, the 4th one, where Marty himself now needs to go back into his own ordinary world. But that also doesn't go as planned or with a normal way. Of course, things need to happen in order for the story to be interesting. But eventually he goes back in time, and then he sees the resolution that everything has changed for the better. So this entire movie, tumbling from here, tumbling into the rabbit hole, falling to the deepest point of his existence, and then trying to get up again, and then trying to get up again a second time. Is something, it's like this, go up, go down, go up, go down. Eventually, the audience doesn't know, is it going to go down again, is it going up again? You try to put people on the wrong foot. But eventually, everything gets resolved. So we have this 4 very distinct acts here, divided by the midpoint. There is another way to cut this movie, because as you can see, the first act is built up out of daylight scenes here, then nighttime scenes here. Okay? And then daylight scenes here, nighttime scenes there. Again, daylight, nights, daylight, nights. Let me just show you. There's another way. There's actually a 5-act structure that I believe is a very interesting structure. As you can see, the acts are not equal of length. You start with a very long first act, a little bit shorter second act, equally long third act, shorter fourth act, and a little bit, on the shorter side compared to the first act. We have a final 5th act. Let me scroll through. So the first act is the build-up of characters. Where are we? Who is the catalyst, and how are you going to fall down into the rabbit hole, into the new world? The second act is, you're tumbling down the rabbit hole. Things get worse, worse, worse. I'm sorry, I don't know how to, get this kind of electricity for the car, until they finally get the solution by accident, which is George McFly's the solution. Then you have this new act in yellow, where Marty is trying to get George to like Lorraine, but everything goes bad for Marty. Lorraine starts falling in love with Marty himself. Then there's a cut here, and then we have the 4th act where the dance begins. Dance begins, the dance ends, and as the dance ends, the 4th act ends, and then the 5th act starts. And the 5th act is the act where Marty needs to go back to his own ordinary world. All right. So I believe that, okay, it's a little bit different than the 4-act way, but there are a lot of common. So, the final act starts at the same time, just after the ballroom dance, just like in a 4-act structure. But the bigger difference is here, the mid part. These 1, 2, 3 acts are a little bit differently arranged than in the 4-act way. As we can see, the midpoint is still the same, but we have a cut here, where the daylight scenes change into nighttime scenes. There we have a cut. So I think these two are divided into two separate ones. Yeah. Anyway, this is the 5th act structure, but there is another one. There are 2 more, which is the 8th act structure and the 6th act structure. So let me tell you the 6th act structure. The 6th act structure is just the 3-act structure, and then all the acts divided in half. Okay, so everything is divided in half. From 3, you get 6. The reason why we have 6 acts in almost all the Hollywood movies is because of 2 things. Movies need to be cut in the editing in order for the commercials breaks on the television broadcasting. And secondly, early on in cinema, there was a technical limitation of the film canisters themselves. So 35 millimeter film, when you roll it up into a canister can hold approximately about 20 minutes of film. That was back in the days, and you would have a bunch of rolls, roll 1, 2, 3, or something, and they will be filled with Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so these rolls would be shipped to, like in big boxes, big square boxes, to the cinemas, right, to the distributors. And they would open up these films and then put all the films into one big roll, which was like very big. They would just stitch all the 6 acts to each other. There's a scene in Fight Club where this is being shown, where there's this film tech guy who stitches the reels, the 35 millimeters film strips to each other with some tape, and then you get this huge reel which is in this behind the projector, and it starts spinning, so that you don't have to switch 6 times these film canister rolls. And shipping one flat disc like this isn't practical, so that's why they cut it into 6 smaller parts. So one would argue that the film canisters were made first. Other would argue that the code, the television code, where after 20 minutes there needs to be a commercial break, that came first. So chicken or the egg story, eventually people settled, the cinema and the television settled on the 20 minutes. And that's why we have a 6-act structure in movies as well. So not just 3, not just 4, not just 5, also a 6-act structure. And let me just guide you through the 6-act structure. It's basically the first act here, which we saw early on, but the first act is cut into 2 parts. So the first 3 scenes are the opening credits: who is he, what is his job, and then the family, which is also important to push the motivations of the main character. Then we have an act break, and we have a new act here, where we meet Dr. Emmett Brown, and we meet the call to adventure, and then we get into we stumble into the new world, and then we have an act break, and then after this act we have the he's tumbling down more and more. More problems have arisen, and things get even worse and worse and worse for Marty. And then we have an act break again at the middle. So every 15 to 20 minutes, there is a physical break. And so if you're an editor, this is a very interesting thing to keep in mind if you are going to sell stuff to television. Television has actually codes that you need to, every 20 minutes, let's see how much we get here. We have 17 minutes. Here we are at the 35 minutes. Again, 18 minutes approximately. Here, 35 to 55, we have, I think, exactly 20 minutes. This act is 20 minutes, and then this one from 55 to 14 is, I think, and I can't even calculate, so 5 and 14, I think it's 19 minutes or so. Then we have another act, which is, so here's 14 minutes, and here's 30 minutes, so this is 15 minutes long, I suppose. And then we have the final act, which is from 31 to 51, so this is also 20 minutes long. Yeah. Okay, so we have 18, 18, 20, 20, 15, 20. Okay, so approximately everything is about 20 minutes, give or take. Then we have a very final way of cutting up a movie, and that is the 8-act structure. And the 8-act structure is a movie built out of 8 acts. Again, here we see the first one, and these acts are built out of 15-minute chunks. So 2 times 15 minutes is approximately half an hour. Again, 2 times 15 minutes is another half an hour. So now we are at the 1 hour mark. And then again, 4 more acts for the almost 2 hour mark. The 6-act structure and this 8-act structure are very different, have very different motivations. The 6-act structure motivation is to cut the movie for technical reasons. So you need to build your arcs and then have the arcs completed in a certain way so that the commercials come the right way. You don't want music to be cut right to the middle and then have a commercial break. So there's a technical reason why people postpone certain informations from story. The 8-act, however, is a more is motivated by plot. So on the internet, if you just type in 8 plot points, 8 movie plot points, you will see that it's called not 8 acts, but it's called 8 movie plot points. And the plot points are things that arise in every eighth of this movie. So I think these two are almost the same as the other ways to cut the movie. But here, the movie is cut here. So Marty So, and now we just see visually that there are little arcs, 8 arcs that make this 8 plot points structure possible. Anyway,
You okay?
Doing, Doc?
Turn out fine. It's your kids, Marty. Something has got to be done about your kids.
so guys, I hope I just gave you a new vision on new perspective on how to make movie structure, because it's not as straightforward or easy as people claiming it to be. There's not just one way to cut a movie. As I just showed you, there are multiple ways that you need to keep in mind, because there are a lot of restrictions when you go professional, and it's not just doing what feels right, it's also doing the best you can with the limitations that you have. So in the end, the way that these acts and this structure has been formed throughout the ages is, one, storytelling pushing the 3-act structure forward, and then also the technical limitations of cinema, film canisters, and also the television codes or commercial guidelines, limiting your freedom and making you make choices in your editing in order to get the best possible product and keep everybody happy. That's what I believe. I believe that we have this classical 3-act structure, we have the modern 4-act structure, and so the 3-act structure can be cut into two ways: the 6 acts and the 3 acts. And then the modern 4-act structure can be cut into the 4 acts or the 8 plot point structure. And then there's a fifth one in between, which is the 5-act structure. And so when you're writing your own movies, keep in mind that structure is tangible. It's not fixed. The best thing to do is to get your plot points right. So you have your introduction of your character, then you have the call to adventure, the catalyst moment, somebody that is going to speed up the process. Then you have the tumbling, the going into the new world, tumbling down the rabbit hole, for instance. You have the exploration of this new world. Then you need to find a solution to your problem to go back to your ordinary world. You're going to stumble into your adversary, the bad guy. You're going to stumble into other multiple problems, layered problems that you're going to have to fix one by one. And then eventually this way you're going to get your story right by getting all these beats or beat marks in your story at a certain time in the movie. And so playing with the time of these beats when something happens creates the tension, creates the suspense, and makes a story a little bit more interesting to watch. So with this, I'm going to leave you guys. I hope I just triggered interest here so that you would dig yourself and find your own solutions, because practicing and doing things practically, being pragmatic, is sometimes the better choice than just diving into books, one saying we have a 6-act structure, the other saying no, we have a 4-act structure, the third saying this, fifth saying that. Dig in yourself, watch movies at a very high speed, and you will see the structure, the columns of the movies for yourself. And that's how you learn. Thank you, guys. And I'll be here trying to post more videos like these with different movies, different genres, and guiding you in a high speed like this to see the structure of all the movies. All right, bye-bye.